The number of women behind bars is growing. The U.S. has seen a 525% increase in women's imprisonment between 1980 and 2021. That's according to the Sentencing Project. It's just a 41-year span. The nonprofit estimates that 976,000 women are currently serving sentences in the U.S. criminal justice system, and the majority of those women are black. The Sentencing Project says for every 100,000 women, 62% are black. That's compared to 38% who are white. Black and Native American girls are more likely to face incarceration than white, Asian, or Latinas. A new book shows black women have been dealing with an unjust criminal justice system for a long time. Since the days of American slavery, in fact. The book is called The Demands of Justice: Enslaved Women, Capital Crime, and Clemency in Early Virginia. Joining me now is the author of that book. Her name is Dr. Tamika Nunley. She's a historian. She's a professor of history, in fact, at Cornell University. Welcome to the Griot, Professor.
Thank you for having me.
Let's talk about this amazing book, your second book in just a few years, which is itself quite impressive. The book focuses on enslaved women in the criminal legal system or criminal justice system in Virginia. What made you focus on that? Say, I assume this because you got your PhD from University of Virginia and you had easy access to archives, and Virginia's real slavey, so it seemed like a good combo, but I'm just guessing.
Virginia is definitely real slavey, and it was definitely something that I've been thinking about for a while. Actually, I wrote the book during the pandemic, and during the pandemic, many of us were protesting against all of the anti-Black violence and police brutality that was happening at the time. And I kept thinking to myself, while we're marching, like, what are we marching for? And what I really believe is, like, we're marching because there's something insufficient about the kind of justice that's available to Black people. And I began to sort of think about my time period that I focus on, and how long have Black women and girls, have Black people, elders, children, been fighting for a more expansive idea of justice. And they've been doing it from the beginning.
You say a more expansive idea of justice, which is perfectly accurate. From your book, though, it seems that even to get expansive, you're starting from a very, very low bar in terms of what Black women had access to, the type of justice Black women had access to. What are some examples of just how inaccessible justice was to Black women in particular?
Well, I focused on the concept of clemency. And when we think about clemency, we think that someone is deemed innocent, and are made clear, their name is made clear of that crime. Whereas in the slave South, the best possible outcome if an enslaved woman was granted clemency was to be sold further to the Deep South. And so even if this person was seen as someone who was innocent, their life, the best possible outcome was to be further subjugated to the domestic slave trade.
Unfortunately, we have a lot of kind of internecine battles and gender wars these days in our community. And oftentimes people will say, well, the thing that made us subjected to state violence and injustice and the most brutal aspects of slavery was our Blackness, not our gender. We shouldn't be thinking about gender in this way. But it's clear that Black women had a very different set of experiences, not entirely different, but certainly a different set of experiences than Black men in some ways. What is it about gender and specifically Black womanhood that made the justice system so perverted for Black women?
Absolutely. There were laws in place that made slavery, the status of slavery, inheritable through the reproductive labor of Black women. So if they had children, those children would become enslaved. And that law, and using that law to continue to expand the enslaved population, was a prominent feature of the nation, right? And how we understand the Black experience. And in addition to that, a lot of enslaved women and girls are not seen as people who are likely to resist or engage in any kind of criminal activity. But in fact, they did. And they did in really big ways. They murdered enslavers. They attempted to poison them. They set their houses on fire. And I kind of see these actions as being reflective of their own expressions of their own economy of right and wrong, right? That they have their own moral values around what justice really is.
Do you believe, and I know this might not be a fair question for a historian, I'm going to ask it anyway. You could punt if you want. Do you believe that the criminal justice system has the capacity to give justice to Black women?
Ooh, that's a tough question. Um, I'm not sure if the justice system as it stands today has that capacity, but I definitely know that Black people are going to continue to fight for it, and are going to continue to innovate in the law, and challenge this nation to be a more comprehensive and fully encompassing democracy. And so I believe in Black people. I believe in Black people to be able to push the limits that have been imposed on us.
When I think about my conversation just a couple of weeks ago with Kimberly Crenshaw, who was here on the show for her new book, Say Her Name, and I encourage people to go to grill.com and check out that interview or other social media platforms and check it out. I'm hearing her list the names of Black women who have been killed at the hands of the state. Their deaths were on the hands of the state directly or indirectly. And I read your book and I hear about the lack of justice available to Black women then. Is it overstating it to say that there is a consistent and uninterrupted sort of systemic force that prevents Black women from getting justice? Is today parallel to yesterday? Are they different? If so, how?
I do think that there is a lot of continuity. And what's interesting is historians don't like to draw those connections between the past and the present. But many of us are, because it's just so clear. If you put my book in conversation with so many of the books that are capturing this contemporary moment and what's happening to Black people and Black women, you see the trend, you see the systemic forces at work that see Black women's bodies as disposable, that engages in active anti-Black violence, and in a way where justice is not accessible, right, to us. And so we're constantly sort of on a broader struggle, a Black liberation struggle that has been happening for centuries since we've arrived here.
If you could have a single takeaway that you could give to everybody from the book, what would it be? What do you want people to get from this project?
I want them to understand that everything that is deemed as a crime or, designated as a crime in American law could always be challenged and complicated. And I want us to question our assumptions about who becomes designated as a criminal. More than anything, I want us to sort of think about people who have the least access to justice and the ways in which they may be trying to push a society to be more expansive in thinking about justice and its reach.
Dr. Tamika Nunley, historian and professor at Cornell University, I want to thank you so much for joining us. Everybody, make sure you check out the book. It's called The Demands of Justice, Enslaved Women, Capital Crime, and Clemency in Early Virginia. And as always, we encourage you to support your local Black-owned bookstore.